The tingling started the way these things always start. Not dramatic, not a warning you can point to and say, that was the moment. It was at night, mostly. A slow crawl up from my feet, like static electricity that never fully discharged. I'd move my legs under the sheets and it would ease for a moment, then come back. I told myself it was the mattress, then I told myself it was age. I'm 83 years old. Something is always going to feel different than it did at 50. But here's the thing about telling yourself it's just age. It lets you stop asking why. And when you stop asking why, nothing changes. I had a conversation about 2 years ago with someone I trust. Not my primary doctor, a specialist in metabolic health who works specifically with older adults. And she said something I've been turning over ever since. She said, "The tingling isn't the problem. The tingling is the report. It's your nervous system filing a complaint about something that's been happening for a long time underneath." What was happening underneath had a name. I didn't know the name. Most people over 60 don't. And the reason most people don't know it isn't because it's obscure. It's because a standard appointment doesn't leave room for it. Your doctor has, on average, 8 minutes with you. In 8 minutes, they can check your numbers, adjust your medication, and send you to the lab. They cannot sit down and walk you through the biological process by which certain daily habits quietly damage the tiny blood vessels that feed your peripheral nerves. That's not a failing, that's a system. So I'm going to do what those 8 minutes don't allow. There is a process, it has a proper medical name, and research has been tracking it for over 2 decades, by which elevated blood sugar causes glucose molecules to attach themselves to proteins in your body in a way that forms what scientists call advanced glycation end products. Most people have never heard that term. AGEs, they're abbreviated. And what AGEs do to the microvasculature, the smallest blood vessels in your body, the ones feeding your feet, your calves, the tips of your fingers, is something every person over 65 who has ever felt tingling or numbness or burning should understand completely. These tiny vessels are not like your arteries. They don't have a lot of room to give. When AGEs accumulate in their walls, the walls stiffen. Blood flow slows. The nerve fibers that depend on those vessels for oxygen and nutrients begin to starve slowly. Not suddenly, slowly. And the first signal those nerves send when they start to starve is exactly what you felt last night under the sheets. That's the report. Now, I stopped 4 things, not added 4 things. Stopped. And I want to be clear about what I mean by eased. The sensation became less frequent, less intense, more manageable. I'm not telling you I eliminated it. I'm not telling you this is a cure. I'm telling you what changed for me when I understood the mechanism and removed the things that were feeding it. The first thing I stopped was drinking anything with added sugar before noon. This sounds simple. It wasn't simple for me. I've been starting every morning with a glass of orange juice for 30 years. It was ritual. It felt like health. And when research started connecting concentrated fructose intake, not fruit, concentrated liquid fructose, to dramatically elevated AGE production in the bloodstream, I resisted the information for months before I actually acted on it. A glass of orange juice contains roughly the same amount of sugar as a can of soda, but without the fiber that slows glucose entry in whole fruit. When that sugar hits your bloodstream fast, especially in the morning after 8 hours of fasting, the conditions for AGE formation are nearly ideal. The glucose is high, the proteins are available, the chemistry proceeds. I switched to water with a slice of lemon every morning, and I moved fruit, whole fruit, an apple, some blueberries, to mid-morning after I'd eaten protein first. Within 3 weeks, I noticed my morning fasting numbers looked different. Not dramatically, but consistently quieter. Drop your fasting blood sugar number in the comments right now. Just the number. I want to see where people are starting. The second thing I stopped was cooking with certain oils. This one surprised me more than the juice. I'd been using vegetable oil for decades. Corn oil, sunflower oil, sometimes canola. They were marketed as heart-healthy. They were inexpensive. I didn't question them. Research published in nutritional science journals has established that vegetable oils high in omega-6 fatty acids, when heated and consumed regularly, contribute to a specific type of inflammation in the walls of small blood vessels, exactly the microvasculature we're talking about. The mechanism involves prostaglandins, inflammatory compounds your body produces from those fats. And those prostaglandins don't just create general inflammation. They create it in the tissue that matters most for nerve health, the capillaries. I replaced vegetable oil entirely with extra virgin olive oil and occasional butter. Both have been shown in research to have a far less inflammatory effect on microvasculature. The olive oil especially has compounds, polyphenols, that research has associated with protective effects on small vessel walls. It's a $7 bottle instead of a $4 bottle. That's the cost of the change. The third thing I stopped, and this is the one I want you to think about most carefully because it's the one nobody connects to tingling legs, was sitting down immediately after dinner. For most of my adult life, dinner ended and I sat. Television, a book, the newspaper. An hour, sometimes two before bed. It felt like rest. It felt earned. What I didn't understand is what happens to glucose in your bloodstream during that sitting hour. Your dinner raised your blood sugar. It's raising it in everyone. But in a body where insulin response is already slower than it used to be, that glucose stays elevated longer. And every additional hour of elevation is additional time for glycation chemistry to proceed in your smallest vessels. Research has documented something called post-meal glucose clearance through a mechanism that doesn't require insulin at all. When you move, even slowly, even just walking through your own house, your muscle cells activate a transporter that physically pulls glucose out of the bloodstream and into muscle tissue. The research compared a short walk after dinner to a longer walk at another time of day. The post-dinner walk reduced the blood sugar area under the curve significantly more. I started walking for 10 minutes after dinner, around my kitchen, down the hallway, around the block on nights when the weather allowed. The movement was not athletic. I'm 83. Athletic is not the goal. Consistent is the goal. And the fourth thing I stopped was the habit I was most reluctant to examine. I stopped staying up past 10:30. I'd been a late sleeper my whole adult life, 11, sometimes midnight. I thought of it as personality, as independence. I didn't connect my sleep timing to what was happening in my legs at 2 in the morning. Here's what the research showed me. In the hours before dawn, roughly 2 to 4 in the morning, your body initiates a hormonal preparation for waking. Cortisol begins to rise. And when cortisol rises, it signals your liver to release stored glucose into your bloodstream. This is normal. This happens in everyone. But when your sleep is shortened, or when you're not in deep enough sleep during those hours, the cortisol release is larger and earlier than it should be. Your blood sugar rises in the middle of the night, while you're sleeping, before you've eaten a single thing. The tingling that woke me at 2 in the morning wasn't random. It had a metabolic context. And when I started going to bed consistently before 10:30, same time, every night, room cool, no screens after 9, the 2 in the morning waking became less frequent. The tingling that came with it, less insistent. Sleep doesn't feel like medicine. That's why nobody treats it like medicine. Now, stopping 4 things is not the complete picture. I want to be clear about that. The 4 things I stopped removed the primary inputs that were accelerating glycation damage. But the nerves themselves, the small fibers that were already stressed, needed support as well. Not replacement, support. 3 things I added work as a system alongside what I stopped. The first is protein at breakfast. Real protein, eggs or Greek yogurt, before any carbohydrate touches my plate. The mechanism connects to how your gut responds to protein before glucose. Specific hormones are released that slow the subsequent glucose rise from whatever you eat next. It changes the entire metabolic character of your morning. The second is cold-stored resistant starch, rice or potatoes cooked the night before and eaten cold or at room temperature. The cooling process physically restructures the starch in a way that slows glucose release for hours. Same food, stored differently. Fundamentally different effect on blood sugar. And the third is nutritional support, specifically targeted at what researchers call the antioxidant environment of peripheral nerve tissue. There is an antioxidant compound that has been studied in multiple clinical trials specifically for its effect on nerve health in people with elevated blood sugar. The research is not preliminary. It spans decades. The compound works at the cellular level in nerve tissue. It doesn't lower blood sugar directly. It addresses the oxidative stress that elevated blood sugar creates in the nerves themselves. If your feet burn at night, or go numb, or feel cold no matter how many socks you wear, please don't ignore it. I almost did, and I'm 80 years old. For years I told myself it was just age, the tingling, the heaviness in my legs climbing the stairs. But it wasn't age. It was my blood sugar quietly damaging the nerves and the circulation in my legs, and almost nobody warned me in time. If you let it keep going, those little signals turn into something you can't undo. I wasn't willing to lose my feet or my independence. So I started doing one thing every single day to help support healthy blood sugar and protect my legs. I'll show you exactly what in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. Tingling didn't ease because I found something new to add. It eased because I stopped feeding the process underneath it. But stopping the inputs only changes the direction. It doesn't rebuild what the years already touched. That's the part I want to be precise about. Because I think people hear, I stopped 4 things and the tingling eased, and they expect removal to be enough. It isn't. Removal is the first move. What comes after is the system that works on what the stopping revealed. Here's what I mean. After I removed the juice, the vegetable oils, the post-dinner sitting, and the late nights, my morning numbers quieted. The overnight glucose curve flattened. The chemical environment inside those small vessels feeding my leg nerves was less hostile than it had been in years. That's real, that matters. But the nerve fibers that had been under stress don't repair themselves just because the pressure eased. Think of it this way. If water has been leaking through a crack in a wall for 15 years, stopping the leak is not the same as fixing the wall. The crack is still there. The damage that accumulated is still there. You've changed the direction. You haven't reversed the history. So I added 3 things, not as replacements for what I removed, but as the next layer working on what the removal exposed. The first is protein before anything else at breakfast. Not for the calories, for the hormonal signal it sends before glucose arrives. When protein is the first thing your gut processes in the morning, your body releases a hormone that slows how quickly everything else you eat enters your bloodstream. Research has documented this clearly. Same meal, same carbohydrates, protein eaten first, and the glucose curve that follows is meaningfully flatter. For nerve tissue that has been under chronic glucose stress, a flatter morning curve is not a minor detail. It is the difference between continued exposure and a protected window. The second is the 10-minute walk after dinner. Not exercise, a biological mechanism. When you move after a meal, even slowly, even just through your own house, muscle cells activate a glucose transporter that clears sugar from the bloodstream without needing insulin to work. Research comparing post-meal movement to longer workouts at other times found that 10 minutes after dinner reduced the overnight glucose exposure more than a longer morning session. 10 minutes. The movement doesn't need to be athletic. It needs to happen within 30 minutes of finishing dinner, before the glucose from that meal has peaked. The third is a consistent bedtime in a cool room. Same time every night. Not a range, a specific time. Room at 66 degrees. Your body needs to drop its core temperature to enter the deep sleep stages where insulin sensitivity is partially restored overnight. Research on sleep architecture has established that a warm room and a variable bedtime both reduce time spent in those restorative stages. What your blood sugar does between 2 and 4 in the morning is partly determined by whether you're in deep sleep or lying awake when cortisol begins to rise. A consistent, cool night changes that pattern. 3 additions, 4 removals, 1 direction. I want to tell you about a woman I heard from. 79 years old from Ohio, managing type 2 for 11 years. She'd been doing everything her doctor asked. Numbers were stable. The tingling in her feet and lower legs hadn't changed in 3 years. She removed the same 4 things I described, added the protein breakfast, the walk, the sleep structure, wrote me at 10 weeks. She said the tingling was still there, but different, less constant, more intermittent. She said for the first time in years, she had mornings where her feet felt present from the moment she stood up. I'm not her doctor. I can't tell you her full picture. What I can tell you is that the mechanism is real. The overnight window is real. And what she changed was the environment those nerve fibers were living in every single night. For the nerve tissue itself, the small fibers that had been under oxidative stress for years, There is a layer underneath the habits. Nutritional compounds studied specifically for their effect on peripheral nerve tissue at the cellular level. The research spans decades, multiple independent clinical trials, consistent findings across research groups, not a trend. Peer-reviewed work with documented mechanisms on oxidative stress in exactly the tissue type that produces the symptoms you're feeling. The 4 removals changed the direction. The 3 additions built the system. The cellular support works on what the years already touched. If you made it this far, you already understand more about your own legs than most people your age ever will. That matters. You know now that the burning, the numbness, the cold feet, they trace back to one thing: blood sugar slowly working against your nerves and circulation. And you know the goal isn't a miracle. It's protecting your ability to stand, to walk, to stay independent. That's why, alongside everything I showed you today, I use a simple daily support to help keep my blood sugar in a healthy range, so my legs keep carrying me where I want to go. I put the free presentation in the description below. Go watch it. And as always, keep working with your doctor. This supports your routine. It doesn't replace it. If you're on medication for blood sugar, nothing I've described replaces it. My doctor knows every change I made. She has watched my numbers across the months. She adjusted nothing, because nothing I do conflicts with treatment. It supports it. Track your fasting number every morning for 30 days. Write it down. Bring that data to your next appointment. A doctor working from 30 consecutive mornings of your own numbers has a different conversation with you than one working from a quarterly lab draw. Drop the word control in the comments if something in here landed. And drop your fasting number too.